Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Let's Talk Yoga podcast. As always, I hope you are doing well. You know that I am absolutely obsessed with yoga education, how yoga teachers are trained, and raising the bar for what passes off as yoga education in the modern world. And I met a fellow yoga nerd. Her name is Medha Bhaskar. She is the co founder of Amrita Bindu Yoga in Bengaluru, India, and she holds a master's from S. Vyasa University. And she's also a level 3 certified teacher with the Ministry of Ayush. She's also the vice president of the Women's Council Board in India. Now, Medha and I are getting very nerdy. We're getting into the trenches about what it means to study yoga. Now, whether you are already teaching yoga or if you are considering teaching yoga, this is a conversation that is for everyone. At the start of it, Medha goes straight into making us understand what it means to be an educator. We start the conversation by tracing the history of how these yoga teacher trainings came about. We go into the many layers of learning, and that is so crucial in today's conversation because she hits the nail on the head when it comes to a 200-hour teacher training, what you should get out of it as a bare minimum. And then we detail this as a comparison between a 200 and a 300. And when you should study which level of training, who is the ideal candidate, how to prepare yourself, what are some of the pitfalls. And even though most of you listening to this conversation, you have already done these trainings, you are probably not going to do another one soon, or you have switched to an online mode of learning these trainings, I still think this conversation is something we all need to listen to. Raising the bar for what passes off as yoga education in modern day is not just the teacher's responsibility. It is not only a studio's responsibility. It is every yoga teacher who has conversations with their students or with others. We all need to be in the know-how of how we are transitioning and raising the bar for what passes off as education in the modern world. So if you are a fellow yoga nerd, which I know you are, I would love for you to listen to this conversation. You will get so much from Medha in this one. It is not a checklist of study this topic, don't study that topic. It is not that. It is more nuanced, it is more layered, and you will hear us have a very candid conversation as if we were still sitting in Bangalore a couple of weeks ago over a cup of chai and nerding out about all things yoga. Medha is someone who is extremely passionate. This is her purpose in many ways, to bring more high quality yoga education to you. So I hope you have the most wonderful time listening to this conversation. As always, please remember to rate and subscribe to the Let's Talk Yoga podcast. And if you have an extra minute, I would love for you to leave us a review. These are the invisible things that help us continue to keep this podcast sponsor free, ad free, and for us to keep investing in bringing you this free resource. If you are not already on my monthly newsletter, make sure you get on that. The link is in the podcast description as well as in the show notes at letstalk.yoga/listen. I have a couple of blogs coming your way, some curated podcast episodes, and an update on the online 300-hour training. That's it from me. Enjoy this conversation with Medha. I'll see you on the other side. Hi, Medha. Welcome to the Let's Talk Yoga podcast.
Thank you so much, Arundhati. It is so nice to be here.
I am so excited to connect with you here virtually. I just did an episode last week about what yoga is like in India in 2025. And I was reliving my days at Amrita Bindu. And for the listeners who are listening, Amrita Bindu is Medha's studio in Bangalore or Bengaluru. So we are going to have a conversation about 200-hour yoga teacher training and 300-hour yoga teacher training. And because you create syllabi for these courses and you've done this for so long and you have such an extensive background in teaching yoga and talking to yoga teachers, I was hoping that we can bring some clarity because most teachers have some idea of a 200. Some are confused if they should do more. And I strongly believe that you can shape your yoga studies based on your needs. And just on paper, doing a 200, 300 doesn't really account too much, depending on how you go about it. So, to kick things off, can we first start to understand what made you step into creating these trainings in the first place?
That's a great question. I'm a bit of an education nerd. So I did a fellowship where I taught second graders, and I come from a family of educators. My mom is a principal in a school, and her dad was a principal too at some point. So, I think education is something that is very close to my heart. And having grown up in education family in some sense, I was like exposed to a whole bunch of strategies, things that, teachers do on an everyday basis. And then when I eventually did a fellowship in that, so I did the Teach for India fellowship, I got trained to create class plans and how pedagogy works and all of that. So it's always been very interesting to me to understand how people learn. And when I started learning yoga, Sandeep really gave me, like, he put me through the grinder. Sandeep is my teacher, and he put me through the grinder. So it was not just, going into class and learning with him. If I hadn't finished my assignments that he'd given me and they would be vast and varied, he wouldn't let me back into class. So I think after having done those assignments, I could see the value in going back to class because it really made a huge difference, even amongst my peers. So I sort of started organizing information in my head better. And I felt that a very well structured thought process in a teacher's training can make all the difference. So I think that that's where my interest in creating tools which sort of supplement. I believe that there is no way that you can replace a teacher, right?
Absolutely. Mm.
But if you have tools which sort of help you retain this information and build upon it, help you personally connect and reflect upon what you've learned, I think it makes a lot of difference.
Medha, right there, the fact that you said that you were already an educator, and then you went in here and you went into organizing that thought process. So nowadays I notice that teachers are suddenly being told to think like educators and switch roles. And I think that's why you being an educator, stepping into this and organizing that information, because I think that is key to a teacher training, is how you
Absolutely.
structure, how you slowly trickle down that vast, like it's infinite, right? What do you pack? I mean, we'll talk about it. Like, what do you pack into these trainings, and reading the room in many ways and holding people accountable within, the parameters of what we've got. So I think the like you're hitting the nail on the head of, we've got to think like educators. We shouldn't think like we're just doing something quick and easy. I also think the motivation with which somebody sets up a teacher training is very important. And at least here in the
Absolutely.
West, and correct me if I'm wrong, in the West at least, yoga teacher trainings are looked at as a cash cow. You do teacher trainings because they bring in a certain amount of revenue, like a quick influx of revenue. And I understand that, being a studio business owner, you have bills to pay, you have a lease hanging over your head, you have employees. So I understand the pressures of that and I respect it. But I believe you can still do it in a very authentic way. So coming down to just the 200-hour yoga teacher training, right? Are there any steps that a participant should take before signing up for one? Because the way I see it, there is this, oh, I love my asana class. I love the studio and community that I go to. And then the next step is you're sitting in a 200-hour teacher training for months on end. And I think that's a very big leap. And there
It is.
should be some things you do in the interim. What, in your opinion, would be some of the things people can do before jumping in from asana class to teacher training? Is there anything that fills the gaps there?
Absolutely. See, I'm of a firm belief that teachers training is not for everybody,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm sorry to be a wet blanket here, but I believe that a teacher's training has a certain, because for me, my teacher's training was life changing, right? I never thought I'd end up being a yoga teacher when I signed up. I signed up because I wanted to study with my teacher, and he said, this or nothing.
Mhm.
And I said, okay, but I'm never going to be a yoga teacher, but I want to learn yoga for me,
Mm.
right? That's how I signed up. But eventually I did my first class and I fell so in love with it that, I ended up saying nothing else sort of beats this, right? I walked out with stars in my eyes, literally. And I feel that after having taught yoga teachers trainings for almost 8 to 9 years now, I feel that a lot of my own students were not ready for it at the point that they
Yes.
started to,
Mhm. Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So I think it's very important to be honest about why you want to do the teacher's training at all. In the yogic terms, we call it your sankalpa, right? The direction in which you're headed. Because, see, a class is where you are submitting to a teacher and just following the process. You're experiencing the practice.
Mm.
A teacher's training requires a little bit of independence where you want to gain agency about your own process,
Mm.
right? And that independence comes with a lot of responsibility, unfortunately,
Mhm.
right? It's not just about saying, I am going to be in charge of my practice. But if you are in charge of your practice, that means that you have to put in a lot more effort,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
it's a lot more time,
Mhm.
and it's a lot more reflection. You
Mhm.
have to face yourself first, right?
Mhm.
And you have to be so critical with your own thought process. Critical, not in the sense of, more in the sense of critiquing it,
Mhm.
right? Of understanding where your thoughts are coming from, what are your biases, what are your beliefs.
Mhm.
And a lot of times, even if you are in India doing a teacher's training, a lot of these ideas are very alien. You've heard about it, but you just don't understand these concepts of what is the self, what is the mind, what is the body, how are they related, what is energy, how does it flow.
Mhm.
These are not things that we have ever really, we've not been taught these things in schools. And coincidentally, that is one of the most common things that you hear in our teachers' training, right? I wish we were taught these in school. And to be able to make space, right? Because the mind needs to expand to be able to think about all of this. Is
Mhm.
this the right time in your life for that expansion,
Mm.
right? You can't manage 20 things and then expect your mind to expand.
Mhm.
So it
Mhm.
requires a bit of space.
Mhm.
So do you have that kind of space, not just physically for coming to class, but
Wonderful.
mentally and emotionally,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? Are you in a reflective space?
Mhm. I
And
think,
are you willing to rethink your own patterns?
oh,
I think
wonderful.
that's the major
Mhm. That
qualifier.
response, there's so much there in that response. Firstly, the fact that you said, do you have the mental space, not just the physical space? I think that is so important and it doesn't get spoken about often. And because when you come in, we've said this in classes, I'm sure you have too. Reflection and observation and just contemplation, these are key things in your yoga studies, right? If you are thinking of living yoga in some way, you cannot do it without reflection, right? And you
Yeah.
have to have space in your head to just be able to reflect and observe and go through that critical thinking and looking at your own self in many ways and re-examining your thought patterns. There's so many invisible layers to this. So it's not just I show up to asana class, teacher tells me what to do, I do it, I feel great, I walk out. That's a fantastic system for somebody who just needs that quick fix. But if you're sitting down in a
Yes.
teacher training and trying to learn a lot of yoga, you have to make space mentally. So the fact that you said that the why, examine the why. And even before that, you said something about you firmly believe that not everybody needs to do a teacher training. And I cannot agree with you more. One of the main things I tell participants is this is labeled a yoga teacher training, but there are two tracks. The first
Yes.
student, you are your first student. So you are
Yeah.
learning yoga for yourself, just like you said, right? You were learning yoga for yourself. So your focus has to be learning yoga for you, for yourself. If you can't teach it to yourself, if it can't make sense to you, then it's very hard to teach it to somebody else. And if you
Absolutely.
can't have clarity for yourself, how will you create clarity for somebody else? So the transparency with which I think we as teacher training providers have to say this. So we let people be in our trainings with no pressures of teaching. And honestly,
Yes.
70% of my audience in teacher trainings, and I run really small group ones, the in-person ones, they don't teach. They learn yoga. And I'm like, the biggest gift you can give yourself, yoga, is just to live it. And if you can live it
Absolutely.
in some capacity, even imperfectly, that is plenty. Whether you teach or not, that's a journey for later. And those who want to teach,
I agree.
they have a teaching track, right? Where they learn how to stand in front of a class and say a bunch of things. For the
But
200,
let me also add another dimension here, right? The downside to not being ready and being in a teacher's training course,
mm,
right?
mhm,
So we actually learn so many things which are inherently reflective, right? For example, if you're learning how energy works and you start to identify that those patterns are there in your life, the mind cannot do anything but reflect,
mm,
right? And that's a deeply uncomfortable process,
true. Mm,
right? It's much better not to use these tools to attack yourself if you're not ready than to, just say, I am oblivious to this at all.
mhm, mhm. Yeah. And also, teacher training is a sangha, right? It's a community, it's a group. And I do believe that, if there's one person who's just like, what am I doing here? It does have a ripple effect a little bit.
Yes, it
So
does. Yes.
something I've often told people here, also, I think, Medha, before I go to the next point, is you can't speed learn through a teacher training. And I've told people this, just like you were alluding to a while back, right? Like, if you don't have the time, don't do it. This is not speed learning. If you're going to come to class and be like, oh my God, my friends are having fun on a weekend and I'm here, don't be here. Be where your heart wants to be. So if you are there 100%. And I say this, you do it once. So do it fully, deeply, immerse in it. You're not going to be spending this type of time, energy, resources probably ever again. Most people do a 200-hour once or twice in their lifetime, right? The twice are
Yes.
also the absolute nerds who want to do it for some reason.
Yeah.
So so just be here fully. And if
Yeah.
not, come back another time. But there's a checklist I often ask participants, and you and I, right, but when we meet participants, we can tell if someone's ready or if they need a little more time. So something I send them to do is I send them to read blogs, listen
Mm.
to podcasts. Okay? I ask them to read some yoga books, ask them to do workshops, immersives. And I'm like, if you can't sit in a pranayama series, chances are you will struggle a little bit in a 200-hour teacher training. If you don't want to sit and understand, say, how to live your yoga off your mat, you are probably better off just doing asana workshops, doing more immersive classes, and give yourself time to mature in your head as to what this process is like. This is not going away. That scarcity
Absolutely.
mindset, right? That scarcity mindset of, if not now, when? I always say when the time is right. So if you can't listen to a podcast, if you can't read a blog, you can't read 5 pages in a yoga book, you're not curious about some of these non-asana topics, to me, it's a yellowish flag. Like, this participant's not ready. And if you're like, I don't
Yeah,
want to
it's
do,
like
yeah, I don't want to do all
it's
that.
like they say, right? It's like they say, right? When the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Correct.
I
Yeah.
think that you have to flip it on the head, right? And
True.
say, if you are ready to be a student, the teachers are everywhere, including your yoga teacher in your group class, let's say, for
This
example.
is so true. It's so true. And I sincerely believe you can get a lot out of an asana class if you're in reflection while the asana is being taught. And there's a lot, yeah, training is a lot more involved. So coming down to the actual 200-hour and 300, where did this start? Because this is relatively new and
Mhm.
it's not something that, at least I know growing up in India, it's not something you saw often. What's the history of a 200 and 300 hour?
I think for the longest time in India, It used to be a teacher-student learning for years. And at some point, the teacher would say, okay, now you're ready to teach. So you just go and teach. And in the process of, mentoring the student, the teacher would have already taught the student what it takes. And also during the process of teaching, the student would learn how to teach.
Mhm.
Right? I think also what started to happen as a result of that was that there were a lot of people who were claiming to know yoga, but didn't actually know and were not able to teach safely and did not teach authentically all over the world. Like it's not just, focused on India right now.
Mhm.
And so I think what started to happen was that there was a need for some people to come together and say these minimum standards need to be there. Right? That's when Yoga Alliance emerged. And, the West is a lot more systematic in their thought process so that they made that, they made a system of rules saying, you must know a bit of anatomy. Otherwise, how will you teach safely? You must know practice very well. So they came out with a standard, which now in the recent past, they have actually revised and made it much more elaborate. And then these 200 and 300 hours started to develop in a much more structured format. And if you think about it, like a college course, for example, you may have twice a week and they may go on for like 4 to 6 months or whatever you're studying, right? And this comes up to like what, 80, 90 hours. So the number of things that you're learning in a yoga teacher's training, because you're learning about the body, you're
Mhm.
learning about the philosophy, you're learning about the mind, you're learning about how to teach. So I think that you would need a minimum of 200 hours. So a lot of times I keep telling people that 200 hours is the basic requirement. Upon that, your assignments and everything else is going to go
Yes.
way beyond,
Yes. Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And this is the live classes that you will do, 200 hours,
Mhm.
right? But you need a lot more time. So let's plan for that.
Mhm. Mhm. I'm trying not to go in this direction, but I will leave a note here. The Yoga Alliance model, I think, is flawed in many ways. I think it has its pros and cons. And over the years, what I have noticed is, I mean, yoga is a spiritual practice, right? And to put a structure and says one size fits all is very challenging. And while they have been trying to do something, I personally also have noticed here in the West, there's a shift. Not too many people are asking you for that yoga alliance. Like I tell my students too, like we don't really look at that as the standard, the bar. The bar is much higher. This is bare minimum. This is there for those who need it. But you have to go deeper than this. You need honestly 2000 hours of study. It's just that you will not sit with me for the whole year every weekend. I will still show up, but will you show up in a certain capacity? So I think there is, when I moved say 12, 13 years ago, I noticed there was a lot more prevalence of this standardization. But now I think it's moved in a soft, different direction. It's not as prominent anymore. Or at least maybe I'm not paying attention. I don't know. I could be wrong.
No, that's for sure. That's for sure, right? Like, but I feel like, for people who are not educators by design, right? They are not taught how to think in educational terms. It's a great tool to lean on. It's like a prop, right? You start there and you build something obviously much, much more elaborate. You build a structure on top of this foundation, right? So,
Yes, you build a structure on top of this foundation. But I think what happens is the people who create the syllabus have to be very immersed in yoga.
yes.
And it's very scary to me when a 200-hour graduate who went to a studio, learned some yoga, writes a manual, and then teaches
Yeah,
other teachers, right? So, what
that
is
is
your
true.
foundation? And I always feel like you have to look for teachers who have a rich, immersive background in learning yoga. And not just somebody who graduated from a 200-hour program, say a year or two ago, and has opened a studio and is now creating a syllabus because the pool they are pulling from is very small. And
Absolutely.
there's you have to look for depth. So I think then it keeps getting, it trickles down and becomes more and more diluted, right? So my question to you here is, what does one need to really look for in a core, and I'm doing those air quotes, in a core syllabus for a 200-hour?
I think this is a great question. So I believe that any yoga education, which is beyond a practice, requires two things. One is practice, and the other is the understanding of that practice. Right? So practice without that understanding is directionless. You don't know what you're creating and you don't know where you're going. Now, that understanding without practice is toothless. It can't really change anything. It's just like an intellectual exercise that you're doing. Right? So I've noticed many different courses which are either too lopsided towards practice because it's the easier route to catch, right? Or too much about theory, which has now become like this, especially after COVID, we've all become very intellectual, right? Like we're very smart people. And unfortunately, that's not working out very well for us, right? And a lot of those don't convert into real lives, right? And it becomes like this big intellectual exercise of, I know everything about yoga. I've read every research paper there is, but I can't convert the smallest things into my life, right? So these two are the more crucial components. So you have to always find a teacher's training that has a balance of it, right? That have in its syllabus, in its curriculum, this concept of why you're doing what you're doing, right? Which means that your practice, by the end of this course, you must feel like, oh, okay, I know why these asanas are linked together, for example.
Wonderful. Yes.
Right? And I know what comes first and what comes second. And I can sort of create it. So this is where I'll take you a little bit into a geeking out journey, right? So a lot of educators, and this has been from, I think, 1950s, rely on this understanding of how people learn. They learn in layers, right? So it's called Bloom's taxonomy, and I'm sure it's vastly, widely popular. So, you can go look it up. And it says that the first layer of learning is just being able to recall and remember, right? Obviously, you want that with yoga practice. The second level is to understand. Why is this structured this way? The third level is to be able to apply to real life. Now, I feel the 200 hours must be, like at a bare minimum, have these three components in it. Right? And then there is an analysis, evaluation, and then creation. Now, those, if the teacher's training has, it is superlative. Right? It's all built one on top of the other. But at a bare minimum, it should teach you how to understand yourself and other people.
I didn't know that framework. I will go look it up. But it's really key what you said. Like at a bare minimum, you should be able to understand the why and go apply it in your practice. And you use this word lopsided, which is so true. I think as someone who provides the teacher training services, right, we need to recognize what are our strengths and our weaknesses in yoga. And when you identify that, you can absolutely realize that, hey, I'm heavy on these aspects, but I'm not strong enough on these. And it is, at the end of the day, for me, it's a responsibility of how you pass this down. Probably very cultural to us too, right? It's not about, I just need to get through this. And to recognize that, because from what I've seen, so many teacher trainings are just anatomy focused. So much, to a point where you will have such a nice understanding of anatomy, but you are so barren with the philosophy and living yoga and that reflection and transformation and the transitions that happen, right? On the other hand,
or even experience, right?
Correct.
Having done the Trikonasana, how does it feel like if you can't understand, if you know exactly what muscles are used versus the feeling that it brings?
True.
It is just, even if you are just practically focused.
True.
Right?
And while there is, at least here, and I notice this is not that common in India, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's a lot of fear-based learning. Okay. Not a lot. It exists. I don't lean into it because of my background, but it's like, oh, you don't want to be injured. Oh, you don't want to be injured. Of course, nobody wants to injure a student. I think that is a given. Nobody walks into a yoga class thinking, oh my God, I'm going to injure my students. Right? There's something fundamentally wrong if all you're trying to do is injury prevention.
That is true.
So I think you miss some of the best parts of yoga when you make it purely physical. And
Yes.
I always tell people, if you like the physical part of yoga, imagine how much you will like the rest of yoga. There is so much more. The physical part is the least shiny part of yoga. So imagine how rich everything else will be. So if we have to draw a table, say between 200 hour, 300 hour, what would be the fundamental differences? Does everybody need to do the next level? What would be some of the topics that can't be covered in a 200 but should be in a 300?
This is again a great question, but my answer remains the same. If everybody should not do 200, then everybody definitely should not do 300, right? I feel like it is so important that you take a break between your 200 and 300 to really just evaluate if you want to take the next step.
Yes.
Right? Because 200 itself gives you a lot of things to take back and really apply. You have to play with it. It's like dough, right? Like the more you play with it, the more you understand the medium, right? So even yoga is like that. If you practice more, and let's say you're not wanting to teach anybody, but you just want to practice for yourself, then you need to go through those experiences. And like you said, right, you can't. This is not speed learning. This is not like a checklist. It's not like, oh, I went to first grade, then I went to second grade, then I went to third grade, and then so on. So it cannot work like that simply because 300 hours requires you to already know these three levels of learning that I already told you: the recall, understand, and apply. And then you'll be able to analyze. And then you'll be able to go deeper. This is how even, traditional yoga or any of the traditional Indian scriptures were learned, right? First, you did rote learning. Then you were just given a lot of time to apply it and recall it and chant it and all of that. And then certain questions came up. And then your learning began, right? So if you want to do 300 hours, you might as well ask better questions. And for that, you might as well take the time to experience it.
Yeah. And I also think and just a note for us as teacher training providers, we just need to hold ourselves to a higher standard when
100%.
Right. And to really sit down ourselves and be like, hey, this is where they're coming in from. This is where they can actually get more depth. And it doesn't mean slapping on more advanced asana. It doesn't mean putting in more anatomy. Maybe that has its place. I'm not discounting it. It just doesn't mean, oh, you learned 5 yamas, now let me teach you another 5 yamas. It's not a checklist. It really depends on, and this is something I say very often. I'm sure you relate to this. Who is in front of you? Who is the student walking in? Where are they at? I think it is such a key skill for a teacher to see where the student is at and be able to adapt and move them forward. Usually it's like the teacher says, this is what I've got. Now you fit into this. It has to, in many ways, also it has to be flexible, right? I mean, I'm not saying that students shouldn't come prepared. I strongly believe that the student also has to be ready and committed and has to meet the teacher halfway. And that's when magic happens, right? When the student is hungry, ready, willing to do the work, and then the teacher's coming in, willing to share and be in a certain capacity, that's when really magic happens. So I think it is, you do a 300.
But I want to also add some more dimensions to it. Sorry to cut you off. To add a little bit more to this idea of what 300 has to be. It has to obviously cover everything that is there in the 200, but it has to go deeper.
Yes.
Now, deeper does not mean more things, like you said.
Correct. Not more information.
Yes. It's more experience, which means that Because yoga is a darshana is a perspective or a way of looking at things. Your eye has to start getting sharper as a student,
Mhm.
right? And that means sometimes putting your students through challenges that they need to overcome to be able to see themselves,
Mhm.
right? So the standard of discipline is higher,
Mhm.
the standard of care is higher,
Mhm.
and the standard of questions is also higher,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? So in terms of philosophy, in terms of asana, in terms of applying all of these a little bit more, obviously you will have advanced asanas. You will sort of explore all of pranayama a little
Mhm.
bit deeper. Maybe you will also add mudras and bandhas. And you will also start learning a little bit more about the pratyahara practices, how it works, what is the tantric base of all of this,
Mhm.
and how do you take one experience and go deep and deep and deep and deep and deep. And also, how do you facilitate that for somebody
Mhm.
else?
Mhm. Mhm. You know that the fact that you said you go deep reminded me of something that I tell the 200-hour students. The 200 takes you wide. Everything later has to take you deep. And you can choose,
Yes.
even in the 200, you can choose, oh, I really love, say, anatomy. I'm going to go deep into anatomy. And just know that that's not all of yoga. I love pranayama. I'm going to go deep into pranayama, right? I'm going to work on living yoga. I'm going to go deep into that. So 200 is wide. Everything you study after that has to be deep. And it's not possible for
Yes.
a 200-hour to go deep because then it has to be a 2000-hour, which most people don't have the headspace for. Okay. So,
And also, it's not advised, right? Because you want to learn easy things first, and then build on top of it, and
correct.
then build on top of it, and
Yeah,
layer
the
it.
foundation is so important. So, question for you. What are your thoughts on the faculty? Should there be one or two lead teachers and then say guest teachers, or should everybody be in the same capacity like a democracy and everybody's a lead teacher? Okay. What are your thoughts on what system works better?
I personally feel like maybe a small team of teachers leading the entire course, because having like a core team which sort of keeps track of the student's experience is always better.
Mm-hmm.
And having guest faculty when, as and when appropriate, as and when needed, is what, I think works best. There are, of course, pros and cons to everything, right? So the pros of this is that you have a consistent experience. You're able to contextualize every class and give one essence to the student, right? When there are multiple lead teachers, then it becomes a bit challenging
Mm-hmm.
because, everybody has their experience that they're bringing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's then upon the student to
To
try
piece
and
it together.
collate all of
Yeah.
this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes. No, I'm of the same thought of where there's one, especially for a 200-hour, there's one, maybe at best two lead teachers who are, who know everything that's going on. And then there are
Yes.
topic based teachers. But in a 200-hour specifically, if you just have, say, 10 different teachers, and you don't have one specific lead and it's fragmented, you are ending up it's like going to different restaurants to finish a meal,
Yeah.
you know so there should be this head chef. Maybe I'm hungry at this point, but should be this head chef who is controlling all the other departments in many ways, right? And I think that way,
Absolutely.
because leadership, I think conscious leadership is so important in these yoga spaces. In a 300-hour, it's a little more. You could have a few very strong leads for some things. Still, one lead has
Yeah.
to have, like, the student should always have one person to go to if they are having difficulty. And it shouldn't
Yes.
be like, oh, I can't understand anatomy, I'm going to go to this teacher. Oh, I can't understand sequencing, I'm going to go to that teacher. I can't understand pranayama, I'm going to go to another teacher. At some level, you've got to be able to take 8 out of your 10 questions to one teacher. And
And
that's my personal thing. Mm.
that's where you curate an experience for the student, right?
Mm.
Because as a teacher of a teacher's training, the student is at the center of what you're doing, right?
Absolutely.
Their learning is how you are efficient or effective at all. If
Mhm.
they are not having a good learning experience, then what's the point?
Mhm. Mhm. So true. So true. And being adaptable, right? I've been in groups where I've had to actually step down my level of wanting what I want to do. Like I have to come down to, okay, I'm like, no, this group is more beginner like. They have to spend so much time in understanding their own asana because they don't have a setup practice. So then I have to let go, detach from deeper things I want to teach them. I've been
Yeah.
in other groups that have challenged me from day one. They were just so ready to go in deep, and they pulled out a part of me that I didn't know would be available in these trainings, you know? So I think it is very crucial to have that. Where are the students going to? Who are they going to? So a question for you is, when we talk about the student, because you said the student is at the center of everything. And I believe that our core, what is our key description? Like job description is to make the student successful in a given
Yes.
environment, whether it is in asana, whether it is in shavasana, whether it's in pranayama, in a teacher's training. So how do students hold themselves accountable after a teacher training? Because this, there's this build up, and everybody's so excited, and you work towards the teacher training, and there's graduation, and everybody's so happy and crying happy tears. But after that, 90% of the time it fizzles out for people, right?
Yeah.
So unless it's you, like you have to hold yourself accountable, and it's your relationship. You said this earlier somewhere in the conversations, your relationship with the yoga, right? Is there any way students can keep themselves accountable? I mean, I keep telling them, listen to the podcast, come to our annual teachers meet. I know you guys do a very regular teacher enrichment classes, but is there any hack to being accountable after these long form trainings are done and you go back to life?
So I'll tell you two things, right? One that helped me after I did my teacher's training, and the other, what I generally tell my students, right? What helped me really was that my teacher's training was an extraordinarily intense experience. And that sort of brought the entire group together because all of us really went through the highs of highs and the lows of lows together. And some of them are like my closest friends even today. And this is a very special bond because somebody that you study yoga with really, really gets you, right? And they will let you be mopey, depressed,
Can be
whatever.
vulnerable, yes.
But they will still say, okay, now what do you want to do about it?
Mm-hmm.
As annoying as it is, you need that sort of sangha to keep you motivated and going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that is definitely a hack that I think works.
Mhm.
But if you don't have that and you are not able to create that kind of bond with your classmates, then definitely attend every class that you possibly can.
Yes.
I mean, just before this podcast, we were talking about how in India, I was jealous that you were able to attend as many classes as you can. I think this is a hack that is across the board. Every yoga teacher will tell you this.
Yes.
Go attend as many classes as you can whenever you get the time to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And also keep being consistent, making small leaps regularly.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I was thinking, because, it works so well with my teachers in my studio, we have every week we meet and they bring questions and we do like a study circle. So I was thinking that maybe we should, and maybe we can talk about this a bit later, but create like a crowdsourced study circle where people can bring in questions and we all study it together.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So those are things like a book club, but specifically about yoga and about teaching, for example.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I used to do something like that. I used to call it the Mindful Yoga Teachers Club. This was earlier in the pandemic time. And it was just this. You came once a month and you just brought questions about teaching yoga. And it was beautiful. The only reason I suspended it was just different time zones. And, it just, my plate was so full between yoga and dance and being everywhere. But there is a need for spaces like that. And I remember
Yes,
you guys invited me to attend one of your teacher study programs when I was there. I was so happy. Like if when I look back, I would do that every single day. Just be in that student mode. I think what it comes down to is mindset, right? You are a student who happens to teach a little bit of yoga.
Yes.
And And you have to just set that expectation of, I'm a student first. I am a student. I am a student. And I know in the West, people have hierarchy with teachers and gurus, and there is this school of thought that is against it. But in because there have been difficulties there, right? But in my experience, I like to be reminded very regularly that I don't know much. And there are people who know so much more yoga than I do. And what a wonderful experience that is, to sit in a room and to be showered with knowledge and wisdom. I see nothing wrong in hierarchy when it's coming in true learning form. And just, I sometimes believe, to be a good yoga teacher, you have to be a great yoga student. And
Absolutely. I mean,
and,
that is very well said.
and if you do this, right, you're in teacher trainings, you can sit there and you can tell who is going to end up being a teacher in a certain capacity just because of how they are learning or living in a certain way. And and so to be a student and to find moments where you can sit with people who have more knowledge and wisdom, not information. That you go to Chat GPT, you go to or Gemini, I believe, and Google, you can just get information. And I think in the West, we drown in information. We don't live enough in experience. And so I don't know if I told you this, like sometimes my yoga here, for me personally, because of how limited Redmond is in what it has to offer for yoga, feels very empty. And when I go back and do yoga with some of my teachers, my soul is filled because there is access to knowledge and wisdom. I'm droning on at this point, but what I'm trying to say is, as students, if we can go sit with people who have more knowledge and wisdom, not information, because so much of trainings are created based on information. Here are the benefits of breathing. Okay. But where's the experience of being one with your breath? And has that experience made you somehow a better human being in difficult situations?
And I also feel that because there's so much information available to us, we just feel like we can sort of figure this out on our own.
Mm-hmm.
And there is nothing further from the truth than that.
True.
Right?
So true.
You have to learn with the teacher, and the teacher will be able to help you, meet you where you are.
Correct. And
then take you from there.
And a teacher filters information for you, right?
Yeah.
Because a book or a blog or internet will give you access to something that you might not be ready for, right? And I mean, I could talk to you about this for hours on end, but no, I'm very glad that you have this clarity that you are sharing with us. I want to be mindful of how late it's getting for you. So I want to finish with one last question. What is the alternate to Yoga Alliance? Okay? Because I know India is trying to do something on its own. And I also don't believe you should create a training just because you want it to be Yoga Alliance certified. But what is the alternate? Is that certification even important?
I think the certification becomes important when you sort of take your learning and then go out into the world and to tell people that you have actually been through this process. It is a kind of a foot in the door, right? So I think that on some level that is necessary, because also, like we spoke about, the dilution of yoga is also a very real thing. So, associating with schools which actually have a great reputation is a good idea. And Yoga Alliance, again, I only have a lot of thoughts about it. So let's not get into that.
We'll do another conversation about it. Okay.
But there are a lot of organizations like Yoga Alliance that have come up. So there's the World Yoga Federation, there's Yoga Alliance International. I mean, I think it's in the tens now.
Oh, okay.
The number of organizations that sort of offer this kind of thing. Also because on one level, Yoga Alliance is quite expensive and not affordable by everybody who creates a teacher's training course.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Yeah. And in India, I actually really like the system because I'm a level 3 certified by Ministry of Ayush, the Yoga Certification Board. Right? And I really like the system because there's actually an exam that you take. Right? There's somebody assessing you
Oh,
whether
wonderful.
you actually have learned the things that are there in the syllabus, right? So there is a written exam, there is a viva, there is an asana practice,
Oh,
and then there is
beautiful.
a
Okay.
teaching exam as well,
Oh, I
right?
didn't know
So
this. Okay.
I find that that is a lot more reliable. It makes me feel like, okay, I actually know something, at the
No, and
end
you're
of it.
held accountable.
So
I didn't know they
yeah.
do that. And in my time there, I was trying to find out more about Ministry of Ayush. I was trying to find and notice this book that I wanted to get. I didn't have time to get it. But anyway, something I do here is I'm doing air quotes, an exam for the participants at the end. Okay.
Yes.
And there's a written paper and there's a practical, and you have to get through both because you have to. And I tell them, I said, if you are not going to do well in that, that's a reflection of me in many ways, and partly a reflection of your effort during the training. But you have to actually be very excited to say, yes, I will answer all those questions. I will demo a certain thing. I'll be able to detail some things that you're going to ask me, because we are giving out certificates that now say you are a yoga teacher, right?
Yeah, it is a
And
responsibility.
it is a responsibility that I don't take lightly. And many schools here, I won't even call them schools, studios here, will give you certificates without assessing how ready you are. And to me, back in the day, it would keep me up at night, because that's just, how do you do something like that? And I tell everybody, and in the written papers, they ask me if it's multiple choice. Okay, this is the concept. It is so American, makes me laugh every single time. I'm like, I always tell people, I am trained in the Indian system of education. You will be writing an essay for every question given, because I want to hear your understanding of yoga. I don't want you to tell me what are the benefits of down dog. Choose A, B, C, D. Okay. This is not that type of a learning environment. And we're going to go
I will
deep.
send you the multiple choice questions from my exam and let them answer it. It's pretty much the same anyway. So,
So no, and I think it is necessary. One of my core things that I want to really work on is just raising the bar of education, at
yes,
least what I have access to that passes off as yoga. And one of the reasons why
absolutely.
we do this podcast is for that, to raise the bar of understanding for yoga teachers. And I'm so glad that there is this accountability factor. One last thing
Yes.
I'll tell you is, and also here, I think just expectations are different. Recently, a student wrote to me very upset because I do this online pranayama course, and it's one of my favorite things to do online, to teach. And she was very upset that I did tell them ahead of time that there will be a quiz at the end. Okay. And that I said, you have to take the quiz within 30 days of this class. It's an online quiz. It's just a simple set of questions, simple according to me, set of questions. and and it is for you to see and reflect and learn, right? It is not me grading you. This is just a moment for you to look back and see what you have been, like you said, step one, recall. So it's also that system of, it's very transactional at some level.
Yes.
And I sometimes have to walk one leg here, one leg there, transform and transact. Like, it's
Yeah.
interesting to me, because if my teacher says answer these questions in that learning system, I'm like, okay, I've got to answer these questions, and not be like, okay, you will need 20 minutes of your life to write this question quiz. To me, it's a different system. It blows my mind sometimes. But yeah, any
So,
closing thought?
what are the solutions that I have for this, right? Is that we have a remedial system, right? So, not everybody passes the exam
Mhm.
because, you need to know to pass the exam. But if you don't pass the exam, then you have these
Oh, yes,
actions that
yes,
you
I
can
have
do
those too. Yes.
to,
Yeah.
and I feel that every teacher's training course should do this,
Yes.
right?
No, absolutely. I have that too for the 200-hour and the longer forms. And I tell them that I'll do everything I can to not put them in that loop. Only once in so many like more than a decade of doing this, once I had to put someone through it. And she did so well in the second loop
Yeah.
of things. And I give them a lot more support,
Yes.
in a live in-person training, to come back. Most of all my trainees can come back, sit in sessions that they need more clarity on year after year. So I think it's also just rethinking. Here's the outlines of what we have. How can we enhance it? And yeah. Any closing thoughts, Medha?
Yes. So I think that the closing thoughts are really for the listeners. I think there's a lot of thought that we put in and there's a lot of care that we put into yoga teachers trainings. So meet us where we are, right? Put in that thought and care as well and give us the benefit of doubt as well. So,
Wonderful.
we can make magic together.
Wonderful. Wonderful. There's just, I have to say this. I just wanted to close right here, but this thought came to me as you were saying this. One thing I would leave the listeners with is be in trainings where the lead trainers have written their own syllabus and haven't outsourced syllabus writing. Like here, I have seen they will hire somebody, a studio will hire somebody else to write their whole syllabus for them. And I would always say, go to a lead trainer who knows every alphabet in that manual that they have put in, and they can tell you why this section is there versus something else. I think that is important. Okay. All right. So to close things here, Medha, where can people connect with you?
Oh, I'm on all mediums. You can connect with me on Instagram, Facebook. You can write to me on my website. My email ID is also there. I'm happy to talk to anybody who wants more clarity on this. If you are a yoga studio owner creating your own teachers training, I'm happy to talk to you as well. Because, I think that sometimes it just helps to have somebody to bounce ideas off of.
You always need a mentor or someone who's gone one step ahead. Yes. Yeah. No, wonderful. So I will make sure to link to all of that in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here. This was wonderful. I can nerd out on teacher training with you for many, many more hours and but we will save some of this for another time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Arundhati. It was so nice talking to you.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to share it with at least one other yoga nerd that you know. Together, we can all make a difference in raising the bar for yoga. I will see you next week with another conversation. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.